Callum Anderson was already regretting every second of this trip the moment his Italian leather loafers hit the old wooden dock. "Sir, are you sure you want to do this?" his driver asked, glancing at the small fishing boat bobbing in the morning tide like a toy in a bathtub. "We could charter a yacht, something more comfortable." Callum adjusted his sunglasses and gave a tight smile. "No yachts, I said fishing, I meant it." He wasn't here for comfort. He was here to get away from endless board meetings, fake smiles at fundraisers, and the latest tabloid lies about him dating a French heiress. He hadn't even spoken to her. He just walked past her at a gala. He just wanted quiet. Water. Solitude. What he got instead was a woman. She stood at the bow of the boat, one foot propped on the rail, arms crossed. Her sun-bleached braid hung down her back, and her skin was the kind of bronze you only got from living outside, not weekend tanning beds. She wore cut-off denim shorts, a white tank top, and zero patience. "You the guy who booked the private trip?" she called out, voice clear, strong, and definitely not impressed. Callum blinked. "I thought the captain's name was Vic." "It is," she said, hopping off the boat and landing in front of him. She extended a hand. "Victoria Hale." "Everyone calls me Vic." He stared at her for a beat too long. She arched an eyebrow. "You gonna shake my hand, or you planning to just stand there looking shocked that women can drive boats?" He took her hand. "Callum," her grip was firm. "You don't look like someone who fishes. You don't look like a captain. Guess we're both full of surprises." She turned without another word, grabbed his duffel bag like it weighed nothing, and tossed it on board. 10 minutes later, the boat pulled away from the dock, and Callum Anderson, young millionaire, venture capital genius, and Forbes' most eligible bachelor under 30, found himself gripping the sides of a tiny boat in the middle of nowhere, captained by the most unexpectedly fascinating woman he'd ever met. "Why fishing?" Vic asked over her shoulder, adjusting the throttle. "I needed a break." "From what?" Counting money, he looked at her. She didn't say it cruelly, just bluntly. "You're not wrong," he said with a small laugh, "but mostly people, noise." "Expectations." Vic nodded like she understood. "Out here, no one cares who you are. You catch a fish or you don't. The ocean doesn't play favorites." Callum leaned back, letting the sea breeze hit him. For the first time in months, his shoulders relaxed. They didn't talk much after that. Vic handled the boat with confident ease, moving around with the kind of grace that came from doing something 1,000 times. Callum watched her, the way she adjusted the lines, checked the rods, kept everything running like clockwork. By noon, they'd both reeled in a few decent catches, and Vic handed him a sandwich wrapped in foil. "It's not caviar, but it won't kill you." He bit into it. "Tuna, simple, perfect. You always this bossy?" he asked, chewing. "You always this overdressed?" she shot back, eyeing his designer polo and watch. He chuckled. That was how it started. By the second day, he was helping her bait hooks. By the third, he'd stopped checking the time. By the fourth, he was laughing more than he had in the past year. And by the fifth, something shifted. They were anchored near a quiet stretch of rocky coastline, the sun dipping low, casting everything in gold. Vic stood at the edge of the boat, her hair tousled by the wind, holding a fishing rod but not really paying attention to it. "You ever think about doing something else?" Callum asked, sitting beside her, legs dangling over the side. "Nope, not even once. I love this," she said. "The water, the quiet, the freedom. I don't care about big cities or shiny things." He nodded slowly. "I used to think success meant skyscrapers and suits. Now, I'm not so sure." Vic glanced at him. "So why'd you really come out here? You could have gone anywhere." He hesitated. "I think I was looking for something real." Her eyes held his. "And did you find it?" He didn't answer, not out loud. But later that night, while they sat on the deck watching stars spill across the sky, his hand brushed hers. She didn't pull away, and for the first time in a long, long time. Callum didn't feel alone. The boat groaned gently against the dock as Vic secured the ropes with practiced precision. The sun had barely crested the horizon, casting a silver sheen across the still water. A light breeze stirred the edges of Callum's jacket, but he didn't move from his spot on the bench near the wheelhouse. His gaze stayed locked on Vic's back as she worked. She straightened and looked over her shoulder. "You coming, or are you planning to sleep out here tonight?" I didn't realize we were docking, he replied, stretching his legs. Change of plans, supplies, she said, tossing a duffel over her shoulder. I don't fish with old bait or broken lines. There's a small town up the hill, takes an hour round trip. He stood and followed her down the gangplank. Can I come? Vic gave him a long glance. You sure you're up for it? It's not exactly a chauffeured ride through wine country. I think I can handle a walk. The path wound through dense pine trees, their needles carpeting the ground in soft layers. Birds chirped overhead, and somewhere in the distance, the faint rush of a nearby stream whispered through the woods. Callum adjusted to the terrain quickly, his shoes kicking up bits of gravel as they climbed the hill. You always restock from this town? He asked, ducking under a low branch. Only when I have to. The shopkeeper's a little nosy, but her prices are fair. Vic paused, then added, Don't tell her anything real or she'll spin it into next week's gossip. He laughed once. Noted, the town itself was little more than a cluster of weathered buildings and a single main street. A hand-painted sign above a wide porch read, Nettie's Tackle and Goods. Vic led the way inside, the screen door slapping shut behind them. An older woman with bright eyes and a cluttered apron looked up from behind the counter. Well, look what the tide dragged in. Victoria Hale finally decided to grace me with your presence. Morning, Nettie, Vic said, scanning a shelf of fishing lines. Need the usual? Nettie's eyes drifted to Callum. And who's this handsome stranger? She asked, elbow propped on the counter. Callum held out his hand. Callum. Just here for the ride. Nettie didn't shake his hand. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and leaned in. You one of those tech boys from the city? Vic didn't look up. He's a client. Nettie said slowly, still eyeing him. You watch yourself, honey. These city men smile sweet but leave fast. Callum opened his mouth, but Vic cut in. Nettie, I know. They left with 2 bags of supplies and a loaf of fresh bread that Nettie insisted they take. As they walked back, Callum carried one of the bags, careful not to comment on how much it weighed. You too close? He asked, nodding toward the store behind them. She knew my dad, Vic said, brushing a pine needle off her shoulder. He used to bring me here when I was a kid. Callum didn't press. They reached the boat just before noon, and Vic moved quickly, replacing worn lines and checking the fuel gauge. Callum watched her, then finally asked, What happened to him? Your dad. She didn't look up. Boat flipped, sudden squall, he didn't make it back. Something in his chest went still. I'm sorry. Vic tied off a knot. I was 16, learned to run the boat myself after that. He walked closer, voice low. That's a hell of a thing to shoulder. She met his gaze, her eyes unreadable. You either sink or swim. I swam. That night the wind shifted. The ocean, once tranquil, pitched with quiet unrest. Vic adjusted course, her eyes scanning the horizon. Storm? Callum asked, gripping the side of the cabin. Not a big one, she said, but we'll anchor at a different cove tonight. Better shelter. They reached a rocky inlet just before nightfall. Trees surged up along the cliffs, casting shadows across the narrow bay. Vic dropped anchor and killed the engine. The boat rocked gently, but the water here was calmer. Callum brought out 2 mugs from below deck and poured coffee into both. He handed one to her without a word. She took it, her fingers brushing his. You always this quiet? She asked after a moment. He looked out at the water. Not usually, but with you it's different. Vic blew on her coffee. Different how? I don't feel like I have to fill the silence. That's rare. She studied him. Maybe you're just not used to people who don't care who you are. I don't even know who I am lately, he admitted. Vic tapped her fingers against the side of the mug. Then maybe you're not here on vacation, he glanced at her. Maybe I'm not. They didn't speak after that. The stars emerged, brighter here than anywhere he'd ever seen. No buildings, no noise, just sky and water and her sitting beside him, the line between 2 strangers beginning to blur. Later that night, when the clouds rolled in and thunder cracked faintly in the distance, Vic didn't go below deck. She stood at the edge, watching the sky. Callum joined her, the wind tugging at his clothes. You're not going to sleep. Storms not close. I like watching them. He hesitated. You're not afraid. She didn't move. Fear and awe aren't the same. He stood beside her, shoulder brushing hers. You never stop surprising me. She turned her head, and for just a split second, he caught something unguarded in her expression. You haven't seen anything yet, she said. And he believed her. The rain came in brittle sheets by dawn, dulling the sky to a bruised gray. The cove had held through the night, but by morning the waves pressed harder against the hull. Vic stood at the helm, unreadable as always, her hands firm on the controls. Callum leaned against the cabin doorway, damp from helping her secure loose gear. "We waiting it out, storm's moving northeast," she said. "We'll ride behind it, stay close to the coast." He nodded. She didn't offer comfort, she offered facts. It grounded him more than any calming word could. The morning dragged on, the sea rougher than before, but manageable. Vic's focus never wavered. She didn't speak unless necessary, and when she did, it was to give direction or confirm a reading. Callum followed every instruction without question. He'd never felt more useful. By early afternoon, the skies began to lighten and the wind eased. Vic finally relaxed her shoulders, stepping away from the console. "We'll stop in Crescent Bay tonight. I know a dockmaster there. He owes me a favor." Callum peeled off his jacket, hanging it from a hook. "Did you save his life too?" She gave him a look. "I lent him a battery when his engine died. Not quite the same." The port town of Crescent Bay emerged just before sunset, nestled in a natural curve of the rocky shore. Unlike the last stop, this place had more than a single shop. A few restaurants lined the marina, their signs flickering to life as the sky dimmed. Vic docked with her usual precision, and once the ropes were tied and the permits logged, she turned to him. "You want off for a bit," he met her eyes. "Only if you're coming too," she hesitated. "I don't usually. Something tells me you don't usually let clients steer during squalls either." His tone was light, but the weight behind it lingered. Vic considered that, then grabbed her jacket. "There's a place 2 streets up. Best crab soup on the coast." The restaurant was small but warm, filled with the scent of butter and garlic. Locals glanced up when they entered, but no one stared. Vic led the way to a booth near the window, nodding to the waitress like she'd been here 100 times. Callum studied the menu, then set it down. "What's good? Don't complicate it," Vic said. "Soup and bread." When the food arrived, it was exactly as she promised, simple, rich, and perfect. They ate in silence for a while, the clink of cutlery and low hum of conversation filling the air. After a few minutes, Vic leaned back. "You ever work with your hands?" He looked up. "What brought that on? You don't move like someone who's always behind a desk, more like someone who used to do something else." Callum traced the edge of his spoon. "My grandfather was a carpenter. Summers I worked with him in his shop, built shelves, tables, nothing special." Vic smiled faintly. "That's real work," he nodded. "Yeah, I miss it sometimes. There's something honest about wood. You measure wrong, it doesn't fit. You rush, it splinters." "There's no pretending." She glanced out the window. "Boats are the same. They don't care who you are. If you treat them wrong, they'll throw you." He chuckled, then sobered. "This trip, I didn't expect any of this." Vic met his gaze. "What did you expect?" Silence. Distance. "Maybe some space to think," he said. "I didn't expect to meet someone who sees everything I'm trying to hide." She didn't flinch. "You don't hide it well." Apparently not. They lingered long after the plates were cleared. When they finally stepped back into the street, the wind had settled to a breeze. The marina lights reflected across the water like broken glass. As they neared the dock, Vic slowed. "How long are you staying?" He stopped beside her. "That depends." "Are you asking as my captain or as something else?" She didn't look at him. "Maybe both." "I was supposed to fly to New York 2 days ago," he said. "They're probably wondering if I drowned." Vic gave a dry laugh. "And yet you're still here." "I am." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Back on the boat, the silence felt different, not empty. Expectant, Vic turned down the cabin lights but didn't move toward her bunk. Callum stood by the galley, his breath quiet, his eyes fixed on her. "I'm not good at this," she said, voice low. "Whatever this is." "I don't need good," he answered. "I need real." She stepped closer. Close enough that he could see the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lip caught between her teeth when she was thinking too hard. "This doesn't happen," she whispered. "Then let it," he said. And when she kissed him, it wasn't tentative. It was urgent, certain. Like she'd been waiting for permission to feel something again and finally found it. The storm outside had passed, but the one between them had just begun. The morning after the storm, the sun climbed high and cloudless. warming the deck and painting the water in shades of deep blue. Vic stood barefoot near the bow, her hair pulled into a knot at the nape of her neck, a pencil tucked behind one ear as she scribbled numbers into a small, sea-stained logbook. Callum watched her from the shaded bench near the galley, a mug of black coffee in hand, the taste bitter and grounding. "You always log everything by hand?" he asked. Vic didn't look up. "Electronics fail, paper doesn't." Callum leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You still planning to head back to your usual route tomorrow?" "That was the plan." He nodded slowly. "And now," Vic set the pencil down, her voice even. "Now I don't know." The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but taut with something unsaid. Beneath it, the gentle lapping of water against the hull filled the space between them. Callum stood. "Come with me." Vic looked up. "To the city," he said. "Just for a few days, no promises, just come see my world." She shook her head. "That's not me." "You haven't even seen it," he said. "You think I belong to some polished idea of wealth, but I don't live in gold towers and high-rise illusions. At least not anymore." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I live in a converted firehouse in Tribeca. I cook my own breakfasts. I haven't attended a black tie event in over a year unless I was forced to. You think I'm some prince on a yacht. I'm not. I'm just a man who's tired of pretending the life he built actually matters." Vic's gaze held his. "And you think I'd just fit into that?" "I think you already do." She didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the logbook. She closed it carefully and walked past him without a word. The next 24 hours passed in a quiet rhythm. They fished, prepped gear, and shared meals, but the tension between them was no longer crackling, it was waiting. By dusk, the boat was moored again, this time near a quiet cliffside inlet. Vic sat on the deck's edge, legs dangling above the water, a weathered guitar resting across her lap. "I didn't know you played," Callum said, approaching slowly. "I don't. Not well anyway," she said, adjusting the tuning pegs. "My dad taught me a few chords. Said it helped pass the time when the fish weren't biting." She strummed once, then twice. The sound was raw but steady. "Play something," Callum said. Vic hesitated, then began a slow, almost hesitant melody. No lyrics, just notes that felt like salt and wind and long-lost mornings. When she stopped, the quiet pressed in again. "I'm not built for someone like you," she said softly. "I wouldn't know how to stand still while you go to meetings and dinners and live in a world with no tide." "I don't want someone who stands still," Callum said. "I want someone who challenges me to move." She stood and placed the guitar back inside its case, then turned to face him fully. "If I came with you, I wouldn't wear dresses or play hostess. I wouldn't care about fundraisers or business partners. I'd probably embarrass you in front of someone important." "I don't care if you embarrass me," he said. "I care if you leave." Vic laughed once, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You say that now, but what about in 3 months, 6? When you're back in your world and all this feels like a story you made up to feel human?" She turned to go below deck, but he caught her hand. "Then come see it for yourself," he said. "If it doesn't feel real, you can leave. No questions, no pressure." Vic studied him, her jaw set. Then she pulled her hand away and disappeared down the stairs. The next morning, he woke before sunrise. The boat was still. The sky just beginning to pale. He sat up, expecting to find her already up and prepping something, lines, bait, coffee, but she wasn't on deck. Heart hammering, he moved quickly to the wheelhouse, then down into the cabin. Empty, she was gone. On the table, a folded map sat beneath a compass. A note, scribbled in sharp handwriting, rested beside it. "Meet me at the dock by noon. Give me 3 hours to finish something." He stared at the words for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. When he arrived at the dock, she was already there, a duffel bag at her feet and a ticket in her back pocket. She didn't speak as he approached, just handed him a thermos. "I made you something," she said. He took a sip. The coffee was stronger than usual, laced with something sweet. "I called Nettie," she said. "Told her to watch the boat for a few days." He raised an eyebrow. "What made you change your mind?" Vic looked up at the sky, then back at him. "I want to see if your world's as real as you say. If it's not, I'll be back before the sea forgets me. And if it is," she smiled, not soft but honest, "then I'll stay until the tide calls me again." The flight was quiet, private, and fast. She didn't say much as the city came into view, glittering against the late afternoon sky. When they landed, a black SUV waited with tinted windows and a silent driver. Callum opened the door for her. She glanced at him. "You always travel like this?" "No," he said. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone who's impossible to impress." They pulled up in front of the firehouse, the red bricks worn and the door repainted with a deep navy blue. Inside, the space opened into high ceilings, exposed beams, and shelves filled with books, tools, and pieces of driftwood. Vic ran her fingers along the edge of a carved canoe paddle mounted on the wall. "You made this?" she asked. Callum nodded. "Last year, took a class." "I needed something real," she turned slowly. "Your world isn't what I thought. I hoped it wouldn't be." That night they stood on the rooftop, the city stretching out around them like a heartbeat. No water, no waves, but something else, something steady. Callum reached for her hand. "Stay." Vic didn't answer right away. She looked out at the skyline, then back at him. "I might not wear heels," she said, "but I'll build you a rooftop garden and teach you how to gut a fish." He grinned. "Deal, and if this ever feels fake," she added, "I'll drag you back to the sea myself." He pulled her close. "If you go, I go with you." She kissed him, and this time it wasn't urgent or uncertain, it was absolute. And somewhere between the sea and the city, between two people who never planned on falling, something new began, something neither of them had ever known they needed. Vic leaned against the wide windowsill of Callum's loft, her gaze tracing the network of fire escapes and brick facades beyond. It was barely past sunrise, the city still yawning into motion, and yet she was wide awake. Callum stirred behind her, the rustle of sheets audible in the quiet space. She didn't turn when he spoke. "You've been up for a while," Callum said, his voice rough with sleep. "There's a pigeon nesting on your neighbor's AC unit," she said. "It's very chatty." He rose and came to stand beside her, his hair a mess of waves she'd run her hands through not long ago. He followed her gaze but said nothing at first. "Want me to scare it off? You'd fall off the fire escape," she said, "and I'd have to explain to the tabloids how you died trying to impress a woman with bird control." Callum huffed a quiet laugh, then wrapped his arms around her waist. "I can handle a pigeon." Vic leaned back against him. "You're not used to stillness, are you?" "I'm getting better at it," he said, "but I won't lie, this city makes me restless." She turned in his arms. "So what happens now? We decide," he said, "together." "I'm not going to play house in a loft forever," Vic said. "I need salt in the air and calluses on my palms. I need to move." "I know," he said. "I don't want you to stay just to make me happy." "You're not asking. I'm not that stupid." Vic studied him for a moment. "Then we need to build something that works for both of us." "Your world, my water," he nodded. "I already started," she blinked. "What?" "I bought a dock," he said, "just outside Montauk. It's not much yet, but there's a slip big enough for your boat and a little house that needs work." Her jaw tightened. "You did that without telling me?" "I did it because I wanted you to know I'm serious," he said. "You don't belong in a world of boardrooms, and I don't belong on a boat forever, but we can meet in the middle." Vic stepped back, emotion flickering across her face. "You really bought a dock?" "I really did," he said. "And the house has a roof that leaks, a porch with broken rails, and enough space for a workbench and a giant freezer for fish." Her eyes narrowed. "You're proposing we live in a fixer-upper by the sea." "I'm proposing we build something together," he said. "Not just a house, a life." Vic's breath caught. She didn't speak for several seconds. "I've never lived with anyone," she said. "I don't share space well." "You don't have to share it. You just have to let me be in it." Her eyes searched his. "And you'll keep your firehouse loft," he nodded. "For now, the company's still mine. I have responsibilities, but I can work remotely half the time and the rest. Maybe you'll come with me sometimes." "You want me to bounce between a boat and the city?" "I want you," he said. "Wherever that means, however that works." She was quiet again. Then she said, "You know nothing about building a porch. I'll learn. You'll hammer your thumb, you'll laugh." She finally smiled, the kind that lifted into her eyes. "You're really doing this?" "I already did," he said. "All that's left is you." She stepped forward and kissed him. Slow, certain, and filled with something neither of them had dared name until now. "I'm in," she whispered. 3 weeks later, the Montauk house smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. The dock had been reinforced, and Vic's boat named Hale's Mercy in faded red letters was tied off at the end. Callum stood on the porch, holding a power drill he barely knew how to use, as Vic measured a crooked plank with a pencil behind her ear. "You angled that wrong," she said. "I angled it artistically." "That's not a thing, not with that attitude." A car pulled up the gravel road and Callum glanced back. "That's the guy delivering the new stove." Vic wiped her hands on her jeans. "Good. I'm tired of cooking over a portable burner." "You're the one who said real meals are earned," he said. "Real meals, yes, not charred soup." They spent the afternoon fixing the porch, installing the stove, and arguing over the correct height for a spice rack. By sunset, they were covered in paint, exhausted, and barefoot on the dock. Callum handed her a beer. "You ever think we'd end up here?" Vic leaned her head against his shoulder. "I didn't think I'd end up anywhere, still feel like leaving." "Every now and then," she said. "But then, I remember you bought a dock." He laughed and tipped his head back to watch the sky shift from orange to indigo. That night, they sat on the floor in front of the fireplace, eating pasta from chipped bowls and listening to the wind against the windows. There were no formal declarations, no dramatic confessions, just comfort, ease, the kind of love that didn't need proving anymore. Months passed. The house became a home. Vic ran half-day trips for tourists and spent the rest of her time restoring old boats with Callum's help. Callum split his time between Montauk and his company, but every time he came back she was waiting at the dock, sometimes with a wrench in hand, sometimes with dinner, always with that same quiet certainty. One evening, as autumn settled in, Callum knelt in the workshop where Vic was sanding the edge of a refurbished hull. She looked down at him, brow raised. "You drop a bolt." He held up a small velvet box, her hands stilled. "I don't have a ring made of driftwood," he said. "But I figured this would do." She stared at him, eyes wide. "You're serious?" "I want this," he said. "The mess, the sea, you." Vic didn't move at first. Then she reached down, pulled him up by the collar, and kissed him hard. "You're going to regret asking me," she muttered. "No," he said. "I'm going to regret not asking sooner." They married 2 months later. No big ceremony, just friends, the ocean, and a borrowed arch made from old boat parts. She wore boots. He wore a tie long enough to satisfy her teasing. Afterward, they danced barefoot on the dock, the tide low, the stars high. And as the waves whispered against the shore, two people who never planned on falling in love found something they hadn't even known they were missing: home. Together. Always.